Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Azia, and I am a PhD candidate in epidemiology with the University of Ottawa. And my research is mainly within the realm of psychiatric epidemiology, so focusing on like mental health, substance use, and behavioral addiction, specifically among equity deserving groups. And so, as part of my dissertation, one of my projects examines the effects of racial discrimination on adolescent digital media use measures, specifically video game and social media use. And so, I'll be giving a little bit of background into that today, as well as talk about why I chose to do this project at the RDC. And so, to kind of start off with some background, we know that adolescents today are growing up in this environment that's like highly saturated with media and technologies, where screens are practically everywhere, used for learning, for socializing, for entertainment, meeting new friends. And so, with this high level of accessibility, it is to no surprise that we're seeing a rise in the number of adolescents now reporting excessive use. And so, what findings from population-based surveys indicate is that just over one quarter of adolescents are now excessively playing video games, and about 50% or so are now excessively using social media platforms. And by excessive here, what I mean is more than 2 hours per day, which is the recommended recreational screen time cutoff for youth in Canada. And what's interesting here is that when we take a closer look, the pattern of excessive use isn't necessarily uniform across all adolescents. According to recent studies, there are disparities in social media use and video game use across several sociodemographic factors, and these disparities can look different depending on the type of digital media. So, for example, we know that video game is typically higher among boys and lower among girls, and the opposite is true for social media use. However, one pattern that does consistently show up is that some racialized youth tend to have a higher risk of excessively using or problematically using relative to their non-racialized counterparts, regardless of the digital media use that is being measured. And one potential reason why this pattern may be, based on previous literature on risk-taking behavior and substance use, is grounded within the stress coping theory. And it's basically this notion that stress isn't just about the event itself. It's like a combination of the event, how you interpret it, and like the coping responses that you have available. And so, given that social connectedness and a sense of belonging during adolescence is something that's imperative, and digital media, regardless of its pros and cons, does allow adolescents to have, a voice, escape their day-to-day lives, find online communities, it is perhaps possible that racialized adolescents who may face discrimination in their everyday life may be turning to like video gaming and social media as a way to seek refuge in like online communities with others who share similar experiences. And that may be a possibility of why we're observing a higher likelihood, regardless of the digital media use that they're using. And so that kind of leads us to the objective of our study, which was to better understand the role of racial discrimination in adolescent digital media use. Specifically video game and social media use. And when we were thinking of the analysis and how we wanted to examine this, we wanted to use a data set that was generalizable, that would allow us to have results that was generalizable across adolescents in Canada, but also include the full everyday racial discrimination scale items and along with some nuanced measures of digital media use. And the Canadian Health Survey on Children and Youth, also known as CHEESY, administered by Stats Canada, does have all of those items. And so that's kind of what brought me to the RDC. And to talk a little bit about CHEESY, it's essentially a cross-sectional survey that's administered on children and youth across all 10 provinces to collect information on like physical, mental, and developmental health. For the purpose of a study, we did mainly focus on like adolescents, so looking at 12 to 17 years old. However, we still had relatively a large sample size that we were able to work with. And so our findings and analysis is still in the preliminary stages. So unfortunately, I don't have any results to show today. However, I do want to end off by acknowledging that this study does aim to move beyond just the traditional identity factors and sociodemographic factors, and examine more so like processes, social processes that are contributing to health inequities among certain groups that are at higher risk. And to our knowledge, this is one of the first studies to do so, especially using a large nationally representative sample of youth. And findings that may be yielded from this project not only adds to the current literature base, but also gives us a better understanding of how digital media use is being used among certain equity deserving groups. And thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Azia. Flavia had one question about the age range that you'll see in the chat, but that you partially answered. So I'm not sure if there's anything else to say as to whether you did any type of heterogeneity analysis within the age range.
Not yet. We're still in the preliminary stages. But if the sample size does permit, like we do hope to look within gender identity groups as well, in addition to just looking at the ethno-racial groups and how discrimination is affecting their digital media use.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.